Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Escaping the Grind. I'm Sully, and I'm your host. Usually, we have guests interviews, but today is actually going to be a special solo episode. I'm reflecting on my year of sabbatical that I've been on. I'm on my 10th month, so I'm approaching the end of a 1 year sabbatical. During this time, I've had a lot of people asking me, how did I do this financially, mentally, time wise? And so I thought I would do an episode on this topic with my reflections and a bit of the research I've done around time and well being, just to kind of articulate it. So bear with me. I am going to put a slide deck up to ensure I stay on topic, and I'll do my best to move us through these quickly. So in March 2025, I hit my financial independence number. Basically, once your portfolio gets big enough, it can produce enough income to support you. It's basically a crossover number. So I hit that number March 2025, gave my notice, and decided I was going to take a year off. For context, I had a very high responsibility, high stress role, large team, large revenue targets. It consumed my life and I was feeling burnt out. So I wanted to reclaim my time and decompress from a very high workload, high levels of responsibility, and stress. So I started a sabbatical year. I did quite a bit of travel. I went to Japan. I went to Vietnam. I went to the Philippines. I went to Colombia a couple times with my partner. So I did some solo travel. I did some travel with my partner. And then in the fall, I believe in September, we came here and we wanted here in Medellin. I'm recording this from Medellin. And we wanted to stay here for the winter. So we arranged for accommodations in Medellin. And I'm currently escaping the minus 30s and 40s of Alberta, which is amazing. And during this time, I've had time to reflect. I've had time to think about the value of time, the value of health, the value of relationships, and all those other things that tend to get crowded out when you have these higher level jobs. And then I've also had time to explore other hobbies and focus on travel. And so I'll share a little bit about that throughout, but I'll also share a little bit of the research and some cool visuals to help you understand how time changes in value over the course of your life. And this is an important concept because I feel like sometimes we just kind of sleepwalk through our lives and wake up way too late. So the way I'm going to walk us through this is we need to understand time and its value. We need to acknowledge and identify the complexities of modern work and living and how that impacts time. We then need to redefine time and the value of that time. Perhaps we need to reprice it, and then we need to take control and build some strategies. So, how to conceptualize time? This, I think, is at the crux of my reflections, and I'd encourage you to think of this as well. There's a fantastic quote, and I'll share it here, but I think you should write it down and think about it as well. It's basically, time is invisible until it isn't. And so it feeds into that narrative of sleepwalking through life. And so you don't really notice how important and valuable time is until there's very little of it left. And so that begs the question, and we'll kind of go through these themes in this episode. Instead of what can money buy you, maybe the more important question is, what can time buy you? Right? Because it's that one thing you can't replenish. So interesting research here. It's the U-bend of happiness. This is research across 132 countries. They basically find that the value of time changes during your lifespan. I actually like to basically reflect on this because if you look at your teens, your late teens, You have time abundance. You have time to play hobbies, sports, hang out with your friends, go to concerts, maybe do backpacking travel. And so you are able to really maximize your time. And maybe the stresses of modern life haven't kicked in. Then, as you progress through your early 20s, you're building up your human capital. You're going to college or university. You're building that human capital so you can develop a career, convert that human capital into financial capital, and build that career. And so if you look at that line from your late 20s to maybe mid 40s, you're working your butt off, you're increasing levels of responsibility, you're probably taking on new roles, your identity is morphing into the identity at work, maybe you're having kids. So all these pressures start to crowd out all that freer time you had in your teens, and people in this phase report lower levels of life satisfaction. And people in this area value time by its utility. And so you're just struggling to know, how much can I get done in this limited time? And this is how I've felt in the last few years of my high responsibility role. I felt like everyone was pulling me in different directions, and I had very little time to do things I wanted to. And this would expand into my weekends, where I wouldn't stop thinking about work. It would impact my sleep, all sorts of kind of ripple effects through life. What's interesting, though, once you kind of hit 50, there's a rebound period. And people tend to value time by its presence. Rather than how much can I get done, the question is how much can I enjoy? And you see that life satisfaction improves significantly once that becomes the focus. And maybe kids have grown up and they're off to college. Maybe you have a better handle on your roles and it's more about maintenance rather than climbing the ladder. And so your perspective shifts. I think this U-bend of happiness is a really interesting way to think of life. And you'll see in some of the charts coming up how there's different dimensions of it as well as humans that I'll walk you through. And so I in my research, I came across this really interesting article from the BBC called "What's the Prime of Your Life?" And I'll link to it. I'll make sure we can share this slide deck. And there's 4 dimensions. They have some charts we'll walk through to give you a sense of maybe these seasons of life where these different dimensions are peaking versus declining. So the first one is fitness. No surprise, we're a lot fitter when we're younger. For example, footballers are at their peak usually under 30 for these professional sports, but then there are other sports that have a longer declining horizon, like running marathons, but the trend overall is linear and down to the right. The next one is information processing. This is probably no surprise. It peaks kind of in your 20s, plateaus from 20 to 40, and slowly declines to the bottom right until you're in your 80s, 90s. Interesting that most Nobel Prize are discovered by folks under 40. So that might be a marker as to when folks are peaking. No surprise, long-term and short-term memory decline. But it's interesting that they have a steady decline. And then there's brain matter as well that also has a bit of an arc. You can see at the bottom. The next one is knowledge. And this is where the story of aging is better. It's not this linear decline. It's more of a bell curve. And so general knowledge is definitely the best performing across these age groups, but it is a nice curve, and it's actually increasing from your 20s to 40s all the way up to 60s when it starts to decline. Arithmetic and comprehension decline as well, which is to be expected, but it's a better news story than the last 2. So our brains are actually developing in a different bell curve than fitness and information processing. And then the last one, which I really appreciate, is life satisfaction and sex. So they're tracking activity, sexual activity and sexual desire. It's peaking in the late teens. It stays stable between 20 and 40, and then it slowly starts to decline, probably around 45 or 50. Interesting that male and female desire diverge, probably getting closer to 60s, late 50s. The most important one, of course, here is life satisfaction, and this follows that U-index chart I shared earlier. I think it correlates really well with time. Again, you're time rich when you're a kid and your teens. Life gets serious from 20 to 50, and then things stabilize, and life satisfaction improves overall. So, what are the conclusions of these four charts? I'll say this tongue in cheek. So in our 20s, we're at our sexual peak. In our 30s, we're at our physical peak. In our 40s and 50s, we are at our mental peak. And our 60s, we're at our happiest. So that's when we're most happy. So where does this leave us? These are the questions that I was asking when I was going through this, and also reflecting in my own situation. How does the modern professional life impact our health and well-being? I think it has a very high impact. Personally, I had severe back issues because of stress and sedentarism. I had all sorts of gastrointestinal problems. I had sleep problems. I had a whole range of issues because of the stress, sedentarism of modern work, but also modern society. There's a lot of processed food. In fact, there's a lot of reports lately that people in their 40s are starting to get cancer more than they did before. Or let me put it this way, you wouldn't expect these diseases to kick in till your 50s. And what they're saying in, I think it was a Globe and Mail article I read, is that it is because of the modern workplace where you're sitting more, you have higher levels of stress, you're working remotely, you can't turn off work because it's in your pocket on your phone. You're eating more processed foods, you're crowding out physical activity, community, and relationships. So my opinion, it has a very high impact, and it's kind of flying under the radar. What are we giving up to our professional lives? Well, I just shared that we're giving up community, we're giving up relationships, we're giving up our health. Maybe we're also giving up our presence when we do have free time, because maybe it's Saturday or Sunday and you're still thinking about work rather than with your friends and family when you're doing something together. How much time do we have left? I actually have a tool I'll share in a slide or two ahead. Important question. And then, why do we give up the most valuable time of our lives for work and professional careers? Think about that. Ask yourself, why am I doing this? And of course, we all say, well, duh, I need to get paid, but there's more to it. In fact, I've identified these drivers. I'd be curious to see if they're the same drivers you think of, or what I've missed. The first one is identity. As we build all this human capital, education, and work experience, our identity becomes fused with that job or that industry. And it's very hard to unwind that, because you become one with your job, and that dictates how you interact within and across society. Social expectations. Everyone expects you to get that career, to make good money, to go on those Instagrammable vacations, so on and so forth. Have kids, get the mortgage, have a labradoodle. Comparison traps. So we're comparing ourselves, and it's a normal human behavior. We're always benchmarking against each other. In the past, it was mostly the neighbor or your work colleague. But with social media now, you're benchmarking across the world. And it's not a true reflection of the circumstances of most people. hustle culture. So we reward in the workplace people who are quote unquote sacrificing to get work done, even if they're sacrificing important things like, that evening dinner with their partner or going to watch their kids' soccer game because they needed to finish the report. So we value that, and we encourage people to prioritize that hustle culture over these other dimensions of a healthy life. Professional status, your title allows you to carry a certain level of prestige. I had a high visibility role uh, at my organization, and it felt good. And I think a lot of people strive towards that, and it ties into identity. And it's hard. It's hard to leave that uh, because of because it's just a societal expectation. This is a tough one. When I gave my notice, I had a lot. I was doubting myself because I worked so hard to get to it. But you got to acknowledge that it is just one dimension of your identity. I've already mentioned this, social media reels. We're comparing ourselves across these highly curated videos and FOMOing ourselves into depressive states. We're robbing all the joy that we have from being content with what we have. So there's so much more to a modern society and modern work life than we know or have experienced in the past. I read this interesting article from the Globe and Mail. It's called "I Like My Job and I'm Good at It, So Why Do I Feel Stuck?" And I think these drivers feed into what this article mentioned. They share these three reports on how workers are feeling. The first one is from recruiting firm Robert Half in 2024. It reports on burnout rates. And so Canadian workers, 42% of Canadian workers in this study reported experiencing burnout, which is 9% higher than the previous year in 2023. A LinkedIn report for mid-career professionals in which 60% reported feeling off track. And then a US report from Moodle on US employees. They reported 66% reported experiencing burnout in 2025. So my thesis, and again, this is just a random guy on the internet reflecting on his sabbatical year, take it with a grain of salt, is that this modern workplace and those drivers I mentioned above, and perhaps others that I missed, are impacting and crowding out how we experience other dimensions of life and ultimately life satisfaction. And here's some of the tools I think you could play with. I'll share one with you right now, and this will answer the question about how much time we have left. It is from Loonies and Cents. It's a financial planning blog, but they have some cool tools. What I like about this is it gives you a bird's eye view of life, how much is left, where you're spending time, and allows you to kind of visualize what you have left, and then what is the quality of what you have left going to be like. So in this tab, health expectancy, it assumes a 90-year life expectancy, you're male, and you're 40. And so by the time you're 40, this is a bit of a dashboard on your physical and mental health. You've already lost about 30% of your physical health and almost the same of mental health. You have there's common conditions that you will be susceptible to, like any other human, things like hypertension, heart disease, arthritis, diabetes, and other chronic conditions. But what I like about this is you can now start to toggle this spectrum here on age. And as you increase it, let's say you go up to 45, maybe to 50, as soon as you hit 50, you start to see this dashboard show decreased levels of health and well-being on all of these metrics. And so the time that you do have left, let's say you're in your 40s, becomes a lot more valuable because you become more susceptible to these diseases and chronic conditions. If you toggle to 60, let's toggle here to 65, which is retirement year, look at how this dashboard just kind of blows up. By the time you retire, if 65 is your retirement date, you basically have 50% of your health left. You have a 60% chance of hypertension, 25% of probability of heart disease, similar arthritis, diabetes even higher, and then these new risks come up on the right. You can check those out and play with this, but it goes back to what can time buy you and how to think about this other portion of your life. So I'll leave this for you to play with on your own. But if you go here and you click from the health expectancy tab to the time expectancy tab, this also helps you understand how much time you have left, assuming you're going to live till you're 90, but how much real time do you have left for yourself? And so it quantifies your time in months. So if you are, I think it was 40, if you're 40, you literally have 600 months left of your life. And then it breaks it down by these different activities that we need to do as humans. So sleeping, cooking, hygiene, driving, chores, screen time, work, and then free time. So it's quantified down here. So you're basically going to be spending about a third of your life, 33% sleeping. Then you'll be spending, another 12 to 13% cooking, hygiene, driving, running errands. You'll be spending close to 14% on a screen. And then you'll be spending about 12% working. And then for yourself, free time, you'll have about 30% left just for you. So when you quantify it this way, it's a bit of a wake-up call. And then again, of this 28%, how much of it are you actually going to be healthy enough to do cool things? What I like about this tool, you can kind of play with these different metrics. Maybe you do spend less time on your phone. You could reduce screen time down to 1 hour or 1.5 hours. So that gives you a bit more free time. You could also organize your finances so you retire early. Let's say you retire at the age of 48. Let's say you can make that happen. So let's see what that equals here. Let's say you retire at the age of 48. So if you were able to make an intervention, and reduce the amount of screen time, all of a sudden you've bought back an extra 20% of time that you can do what you wish with. You can do healthy activities. You can do all the things that you probably won't be able to do in your 70s or 80s, kind of this Bill Perkins die with zero thesis. I'll leave this tool for you to play with. I will share the slide deck so that you can play with it on your own, but I think it's a great way to understand where are you in your life and how much time you have left. All right, moving on. For me, as I thought about this whole notion of building human capital and then converting it into financial capital, there's a bit of a progression. So there's a tension between money and time. And so I thought a little bit about some features or dimensions of this. And so if we think about asset types from a money perspective, these are things that can be replenished. You can always work a bit more, do a side hustle, and replace that dollar. Whereas if you think as time as an asset, it becomes a finite one. So once the moment passes, you can never buy it back. And so that kind of flips the script on how do you strike a balance between money and time. Happiness drivers. In North America, we've been trained by really effective marketing to buy all these things, buy a house and fill it up with stuff. And there's a term for the dopamine hit we get from it. It's called hedonic adaptation. We get the hit, but then it reverts back to a baseline. And that joy that you got from buying it kind of doesn't sustain itself, whereas a time perspective as a happiness driver is around sustained well-being. So being time rich allows you to spend more time on building relationships, strengthening or maintaining them, or working on your health, which provides a long-term life satisfaction. Success metrics from a money perspective is net worth. We're all tracking how much we have and how much we're growing, crypto bros, people pursuing financial independence. And so that's easy to track, but how much satisfaction are you getting from it? Whereas if we take a time perspective, this U-index table tells us that we can use time to minimize the percentage of our time or days spent on unpleasant tasks. So I'll give you an example. For me, I was in all sorts of long committee meetings where you had to read like 80 pages of pre-read documents before the meeting, and we were talking about the same thing over and over again in these meetings, or having difficult conversations with employees that weren't behaving appropriately. These are unpleasant things that I no longer have to do because I've bought my time back and I've reduced that state of unpleasantness. And then there's a social comparison aspect to this. From a money perspective, there's a comparison trap. We're always, again, benchmarking and using that as a way to determine whether or not we're successful and we're doing well. And that sacrifices deep connection, which is the time perspective. So time is the currency required for these high quality emotional bonds. I actually have heard of studies where, if you could compare someone with a lot of financial wealth and someone with a lot of time wealth, and the person with more time wealth reports higher levels of life satisfaction. There's a great document I've linked to at the bottom of the slide called Finding and Funding a Good Life by Ben Felix. There's a ton of great resources in that document. I encourage you to check that out. So where does that leave us? You may be in one of these situations. You might be at the bottom of that U-index where you're crowding out all these important dimensions of your life. Maybe you're saying no to social activities because you're too tired. Maybe you don't have time to build community. Maybe you are struggling with sleep because you have a high stress job, or you're working into late evenings, and you're feeling burnt out. So what can we do about it? So these are just my musings. These are my ideas. I'm sure you might have some. I'd love to hear them in the comments. But these are what I've thought of on ways to mitigate this modern workplace, modern life that's invaded by social media reels, so on and so forth. So the first one is negotiate a more balanced work arrangement. I was a leader. I had to work with staff and negotiate their workloads all the time. And so if you have a great supervisor, this is a great opportunity to negotiate a more balanced work arrangement. If you have a lot of projects, spread them out. Set that expectation with your leader. This is what I can do in this time, and after hours, I'm not working. I'm dedicated to my kids or soccer practice or whatever it is that you want to dedicate more time to. There's some great resources online on how to have those conversations in a way that doesn't make it look or sound like you're slacking, but you're just looking for a more balanced approach to work. The second one is pursue financial independence, which is what I've done. This is a longer term strategy. It takes at least 10 plus years to accumulate the resources you need to sustain your life. And there's lots of resources out there for you to learn more about that. And in fact, this is a plug for a weekly series I'm going to do on case studies of families or couples in different financial circumstances, and we'll dive down into the nuts and bolts on how they can plan financial independence using some cool tools on their own. So stay tuned for that. The next one is leverage geo arbitrage to reduce the burden of modern professional life. So you could move to a different country where maybe your dollar goes further, maybe you're working remotely, and you can outsource a bunch of the things that crowd out your time. So maybe you can have someone clean your place once a week or come and cook meals or do all these things that free up time for you to focus on relationships or community, so on and so forth. When you combine geo arbitrage with financial independence, it becomes very powerful, and that's kind of the crux of this this weekly case study series I'm going to be delivering on the channel. The next one is find ways to prioritize social connections and community while balancing the grind. So again, this kind of ties into number one. If you can negotiate a better work balance with your supervisor and prioritize community building and connection outside of work, this is a way to mitigate and keep that professional career going. The last one is find employment with a lighter load that aligns with your values. And this is probably best for someone who's been maybe grinding it out for the last 10 years and has built up a bit of a financial cushion. And they can afford to maybe make a bit less, but improve their just the workload, the mental load, and free up time, and also align the work with their values. This one's particularly hard for people who have done really well in their careers because there's societal expectations of just continuing to climb and climb. So this is a harder one psychologically. If you're in a senior role, you're going to be kind of swimming against the current, and you're going to be very worried about what all your colleagues think. But I would encourage you to definitely look into this if you are experiencing burnout and all the challenges we've discussed earlier. So that concludes my reflections. Covered a lot. I'd be curious to learn what you think. Where are you in the U index? How are you feeling about your time and how all these different people are trying to monopolize it? Are you experiencing burnout? Have you deployed these or other strategies? I'd love to hear from you. A bit of a disclaimer here at the end. I'm not a medical professional. This is not medical advice. It's just a random guy on the internet's reflections from his sabbatical. So take that with a grain of salt. Again, I'll plug this weekly series I'm going to do on case studies. I'd love to hear from you if you have any case studies you want us to run through the workshop. Love to hear those. Additionally, on the regular weekly publishing schedule, we interview people who have escaped the grind, and a lot, usually they've been people who have gone abroad and found ways to make it work abroad. So if you know someone that has a great story and would be willing to jump on the channel, I'd also love to hear from them. So with that, I will leave you. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and look forward to seeing you on the weekly case study series. Thank you and goodbye.